They say first love can make you feel invincible, but in Medford, Oregon, it made a teenager believe she could get away with murder. It's a story so shocking, so tragic, that it tore a small community apart. A forbidden teenage romance that ended with father dead and a family destroyed. This is a story of first love, then murder. Before we dive deep into this disturbing true crime case, if you're passionate about real-life stories that expose the dark side of love, family, and obsession, remember to hit that like button, subscribe, and share this video so more people can learn from these chilling events. It began in the quiet suburbs of Medford, a peaceful Oregon town nestled in the Rogue Valley, a place where everyone knew their neighbors, where people still left their doors unlocked. It was a kind of town where tragedy felt far away until the morning of December 19th, 2023. That morning, police received a frantic call. A neighbor of 50-year-old Ellie Friar reported something strange. Aaron hadn't shown up for work. His car was still in the driveway, and the house looked undisturbed. What alarmed him even more was that his 15-year-old daughter, Ellie Friar, was also missing. At first, everyone hoped they had just gone on a spontaneous trip, or maybe Ellie had run away and Aaron had gone to find her. But when police arrived at the home, that hope shattered almost instantly. Inside the Friar residence, officers found what every investigator dreads: blood. Not just a small trace, but splattered across the couch, on the floor, even on the ceiling. There was no sign of Aaron or Ellie, no signs of forced entry. And the family dog, normally loud and playful, was quiet and trembling in the corner. Detectives from the Jackson County Sheriff's Office were immediately called in. The scene looked more like a crime of rage than a random attack. And as they processed the home, one question began to dominate the conversation. Where is Ellie? Neighbors described Aaron as a devoted single father. After losing his wife years earlier, Aaron had dedicated his life to raising his only daughter. He worked hard, cooked dinner every night, and rarely went out. Ellie was his world. But in the months before the disappearance, friends said something had changed. Aaron had been worried, very worried. He had recently discovered that Ellie was seeing someone, a 19-year-old man named Gavin MacFarlane. And for Aaron, that was unacceptable. Gavin was legally an adult. Ellie was a minor. The age gap wasn't just inappropriate, it was illegal. Aaron had reportedly told friends that he forbade Ellie from seeing Gavin. He had even confronted Gavin once, warning him to stay away from his daughter. But Ellie was in love, or at least she believed she was. She defied her father's warnings, sneaking out late at night, sending messages, and meeting Gavin in secret. Their relationship, born out of teenage rebellion, soon became an obsession. As police began their investigation, they quickly learned that Gavin wasn't the only person involved. There was another young man, Russell Jones, 22 years old, Gavin's close friend. Together, these two men seemed to have a strange influence over Ellie. What started as a teenage crush had spiraled into something darker, something dangerous. Detectives began piecing together the timeline. On the night of December 18th, 2023, Aaron and Ellie were home alone. Around 9 p.m., a neighbor reported hearing Ray's voices. A few hours later, a car was seen leaving the Friar home. The next morning, Aaron was gone, and so was Ellie. For days, investigators scoured Oregon. They tracked Ellie's phone, interviewed her friends, and checked cameras across Medford. Then, a breakthrough came from a gas station security camera 60 miles north. It showed Ellie, Gavin, and Russell together, buying snacks and fuel. Ellie looked calm. Too calm. By then, police already suspected foul play. And when they returned to Aaron's house for a deeper forensic sweep, what they found confirmed their worst fears. Evidence of blood cleanup attempts, signs of a struggle, and drag marks on the carpet. Ellie Friar wasn't missing. He was dead. The discovery sent shockwaves across the community. People couldn't believe that the same cheerful, respectful Ellie who sang in the school choir could have any connection to a murder investigation. Teachers described her as bright and kind. Friends said she was shy but funny. But beneath that innocent exterior, Ellie had been living a double life. According to messages later recovered from her phone, Ellie had complained about her father's strictness, saying he treated her like a prisoner. Gavin had responded with words that, in hindsight, were chilling. "You'll never be free until he's gone. Detectives would later find out that those weren't just empty words. They were part of a plan. Meanwhile, a massive search was underway. Police helicopters scanned rural areas outside Medford. Dive teams checked nearby rivers. But it was a confession of a terrified young man that finally broke the case open. Just days after the disappearance, Russell Jones walked into a police station and told officers he couldn't keep it anymore. What he said next on them. According to Russell, Gavin and Ellie had plotted to get rid of Aaron Friar. They believed that once Aaron was gone, they could finally be together, free from rules, judgment, and interference. Russell said he didn't mean for things to go so far, that it was supposed to just scare Aaron. But things spiraled quickly. Back at the Friar home, detectives worked around the clock. Forensic teams discovered DNA evidence matching both Gavin and Russell. Blood patterns showed the struggle had taken place in the living room, the same place where Aaron often watched TV with Ellie after dinner. There were blunt force injuries on the wall. Blood spatter analysis suggested multiple strikes. And then silence. What police didn't know yet was where the body had gone. But Russell's confession led them to a remote area just outside of Ashland, Oregon. There, covered in brush and shallow dirt, they found human remains. Dental records confirmed what everyone feared. It was Aaron Friar. The news devastated Medford. Parents were horrified. How could a child turn against her father like this? How could love twist into something so monstrous? And yet, as the evidence mounted, it became clear that Ellie wasn't just a bystander. She had helped plan her father's murder. According to text messages recovered later, she and Gavin had discussed making it look like he left. They even planned to drive Aaron's car somewhere else to throw police off. But as with most crimes, the truth eventually surfaced, and when it did, it was even darker than anyone imagined. If you're just joining the story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next part of this chilling Oregon tragedy. What happened after the confession will leave you speechless and expose the twisted psychology behind teenage obsession and control. Now, let's go deeper into the investigation, the shocking confessions, and how the courtroom heard the story of how first love became first-degree murder. When police confirmed that the remains found near Ashland belonged to Aaron Friar, the case took a grim new turn. What had begun as a missing persons investigation had now become a homicide, one that exposed a web of manipulation, teenage defiance, and devastating choices. Aaron Friar, a 50-year-old single father, had devoted his life to raising his daughter Ellie after the death of his wife years earlier. He was described by co-workers as gentle but firm, the kind of dad who would leave work early to attend school plays, who packed lunches with handwritten notes, who always said his daughter was his purpose. But to Ellie, that love had begun to feel like a cage. Friends later testified that she often complained that her father was too strict, especially after she met Gavin MacFarlane, a 19-year-old from nearby Grants Pass. Gavin was older, more experienced, and in Ellie's eyes, everything her father wasn't. Free, rebellious, and willing to treat her like an adult. Aaron forbade their relationship from the moment he found out. To him, Gavin was a threat, not only morally, but legally. Ellie was still a child, and any relationship between them was a crime. When Aaron confronted Gavin, it wasn't a civil exchange. Witnesses recalled Aaron warning him, "Stay away from my daughter or I'll call the police." That confrontation, according to investigators, planted the seed of revenge in Gavin's mind. Meanwhile, Ellie's teenage heart was spiraling against her father's wishes. She kept talking to Gavin through encrypted messaging apps and social media. The relationship quickly turned obsessive. Gavin would tell her that her father didn't understand her, that he was ruining their love, and that the only way they could be together was if he was out of the picture. What began as typical teenage rebellion turned into a deadly fantasy. Detectives later recovered text messages that painted a disturbing picture. In one, Gavin wrote, "He'll never let you go. You'll always be his little girl. But you're mine now." In another, Ellie responded, "I hate him sometimes. I wish I could just disappear with you." Those exchanges, innocent enough on the surface, evolved into something far more sinister over the next few weeks. By early December 2023, Gavin's friend Russell Jones, age 22, had been drawn into their orbit. Jones, who was described as quiet and easily influenced, looked up to Gavin like a brother. He often went along with Gavin's reckless ideas. Drinking, staying out late, minor thefts. But this time, the stakes were far higher. According to police reports, it was Gavin who began floating the idea of teaching Aaron a lesson. At first, the talk was vague. But as tensions between father and daughter escalated, the plan solidified. Russell later told detectives that he thought it was just going to be an intimidation. Scare him a little, make him back off. But on the night of December 18th, 2023, that lesson became murder. That evening, Aaron and Ellie were at home watching television. A neighbor reported hearing loud voices, possibly an argument. Sometime around 9:30 p.m., investigators believe Gavin and Russell arrived at the house. The back door was unlocked. Ellie had made sure of it. What happened next was pieced together through forensic evidence, confessions, and digital records. Aaron was attacked in the living room. Blood spatter on the walls and ceiling suggested multiple blows from a blunt object. There was no evidence of defensive wounds outside that area, indicating Aaron likely never saw it coming. According to prosecutors, Ellie was present during the attack. They allege that while Gavin struck her father, Ellie stood nearby, frozen, silent, or perhaps complicit. When Aaron fell to the floor, Gavin allegedly struck him again. The medical examiner would later confirm that Aaron died from blunt force trauma to the head. After the killing, the trio faced a chilling problem: what to do with the body. Russell's later confession revealed that they wrapped Aaron in a blanket, carried him out of the house, and loaded him into the back of his own car. From there, they drove south toward a wooded area near Ashland. It was dark, cold, and raining, and for miles, Ellie said nothing. Around 3 a.m., they stopped on a dirt road. The two men dug a shallow grave, about 2 feet deep, using a shovel Gavin had brought. They left the body there, covered it with brush, and drove away. When they returned to Medford, Ellie showered and changed clothes. Gavin and Russell cleaned the living room, using towels and bleach. They thought they had erased the evidence, but they hadn't. Blood had soaked into the carpet and splattered behind furniture. Microscopic traces remained on the walls and ceiling. To trained forensic eyes, the cover-up was sloppy. The next morning, Aaron's co-workers grew worried when he didn't show up for work. Calls went unanswered. By afternoon, the police were at his house, and the investigation had begun. Detectives immediately suspected foul play. There were signs of cleanup, but no forced entry. Blood evidence made it clear a violent event had occurred inside. And when they realized Ellie was missing, alarm bells went off. Amber alerts went statewide. News outlets across Oregon began broadcasting the story of a missing father and daughter. At first, people feared a kidnapping or double homicide. No one suspected that the missing girl might be involved. But as detectives pulled phone records, they uncovered the first major lead. Ellie's phone had last pinged near a gas station outside Grants Pass, nearly 60 miles from Medford. Surveillance footage confirmed it. There on camera were Ellie Friar, Gavin MacFarlane, and Russell Jones. They were calm, buying drinks and snacks. Ellie appeared relaxed, laughing even. That footage changed everything. Police now knew this wasn't a kidnapping. Ellie wasn't a victim. She was traveling willingly with two men, one of whom had every reason to hate her father. The trio drove north after that, stopping in multiple small towns. Investigators later found ATM records, gas receipts, and witness statements that placed them in Eugene, Salem, and even as far as Portland. But the manhunt didn't last long. Within 4 days, officers found the group at a friend's apartment in Portland. They were arrested without incident. At first, Ellie denied knowing anything. She told police her father was alive when she last saw him, and that they had left home because she couldn't take it anymore. But under questioning, her story began to crumble. Investigators showed her photos from the crime scene. The blood, the couch, the spatter. She went silent. When asked about Gavin, she said, "He told me everything would be okay. He said my dad would just go away." Meanwhile, Gavin refused to cooperate. He denied killing Aaron and insisted that Russell had done it. He portrayed himself as a victim, a young man in love who got caught in a bad situation. But Russell feeling immense guilt, broke down. He confessed everything in graphic detail, leading police to Aaron's body. That confession confirmed what detectives already suspected, that this murder had been planned, not spontaneous. It was driven by anger, jealousy, and a dangerous illusion of love. By the time prosecutors brought formal charges, the community was in disbelief. A teenage girl, barely 16, was being charged with conspiracy to commit murder in connection with the death of her own father. Gavin faced first-degree murder, and Russell faced second-degree charges for his role in the killing and disposal of the body. The story made national headlines. It was a modern tragedy, a forbidden romance gone horribly wrong. Parents across Oregon talked about it at dinner tables. Teachers held discussions about manipulation, grooming, and online influence. And through it all, people asked the same question: how could a 15-year-old participate in something so horrific? Before we move into the next chapter, the confessions, the courtroom battles, and the final sentences, if the story has gripped you so far, take a second to like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps bring more awareness to true stories like this one. Stories that remind us how easily love can turn deadly when it crosses moral and legal boundaries. Next, we'll go inside the interrogation rooms, hear the shocking confessions, and see how the courtroom uncovered the truth behind first love, then murder. The arrests of Gavin MacFarlane, Russell Jones, and Ellie Friar sent a wave of disbelief through Oregon. The idea that a 15-year-old girl could be involved in the murder of her father was unthinkable. But the deeper investigators dug, the clearer the story became. This wasn't a random act of violence. It was the deadly end of a forbidden love story. In the interrogation rooms at the Jackson County Sheriff's Office, detectives began to separate the suspects. Gavin sat silent, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the wall. Russell was shaking, barely able to lift his head. Ellie looked pale, exhausted, and confused, a teenager caught between guilt and denial. Detectives started with Russell. They knew he was the weakest link. They had his phone records, the surveillance footage, and the trail of blood evidence leading to the shallow grave near Ashland. When confronted, Russell initially tried to deflect responsibility. "It wasn't supposed to happen like that," he said quietly. "It was just supposed to be a scare." But after several hours of questioning, the emotional weight became too much. He broke down. Through tears, he told detectives that Gavin was the one who planned everything. According to Russell's confession, Gavin was obsessed with Ellie. He constantly talked about how Aaron was the only thing standing in their way. Gavin had convinced Ellie that her father was abusive and controlling, though there was no evidence of that. He told her she deserved to be free, that love like theirs was bigger than rules. To a vulnerable 15-year-old desperate for independence, those words were intoxicating. Russell detailed the night of the murder. He said Gavin brought a metal pipe, wrapped in a towel, and told him they were just going to scare Aaron. But when they entered the house and Aaron stood up from the couch, Gavin didn't hesitate. He swung the pipe once, twice, before Aaron could even react. Russell said he froze. Ellie screamed, and then Gavin struck again. When it was over, Gavin turned to Ellie and said, "Now we could be together." Those 5 words, repeated later in court, would haunt everyone who heard them. After the murder, the 3 loaded Aaron's body into the trunk of his own car. They drove through the night until they found an isolated area near Ashland. There, they buried the body and discarded some of the evidence, gloves, towels, and the pipe, though not all of it. That oversight would later prove crucial in securing convictions. While Russell's confession filled in much of the story, detectives still needed confirmation from Ellie. When they entered her interrogation room, she was quiet, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Detective Laura Harper began gently, asking Ellie about her father. Ellie described him as strict, controlling, and always angry when she tried to be herself. But when pressed for examples of abuse, she faltered. "He just didn't understand me," she said. When shown the text messages between her and Gavin, Ellie's face fell. Messages like, "He'll never let you be free," and "once he's gone, it's just us," painted a clear picture of manipulation and emotional grooming. The detective leaned forward. "Ellie, we know Gavin hurt your father, but we need to know, were you part of this plan?" Tears welled in her eyes. She whispered, "I didn't stop him." Those 4 words were enough. Though she never physically struck her father, prosecutors argued that Ellie's involvement, unlocking the back door, helping clean up, and leaving with Gavin afterward, made her a conspirator in the murder. As investigators pieced together the evidence, the picture became undeniable. Gavin MacFarlane had orchestrated the murder, believing it was the only way to keep Ellie in his life. Russell Jones had helped carry it out, too frightened and submissive to resist Gavin's control. And Ellie Friar, manipulated and emotionally dependent, had become an accomplice to her father's death. When news of the confessions broke, Medford erupted in shock. Parents were horrified. Students whispered in hallways, and social media exploded with outrage. Some blamed Gavin for manipulating Ellie. Others couldn't forgive Ellie for turning on her father. But everyone agreed on one thing. This was a tragedy that didn't have to happen. In April 2024, formal charges were filed. Gavin MacFarlane was charged with first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, abuse of a corpse. Russell Jones was charged with second-degree murder, abuse of a corpse, tampering with evidence. Ellie Friar, because of her age, was charged as a juvenile with conspiracy to commit murder, tampering with evidence. Her case would later be moved to adult court due to the severity of the crime. The trial preparations drew national attention. True crime podcasts, online sleuths, and major outlets like CBS's 48 Hours began investigating the story. They titled their special First Love, Then Murder, a chilling summary of how a teenage romance spiraled into homicide. In interviews, Aaron's relatives described him as a devoted dad who was just trying to protect his daughter from an inappropriate relationship. They said he had gone to police once, but there was little they could do without evidence of harassment or danger. Family friend Mark Denton told reporters, "He loved Ellie more than anything. That's the part that hurts the most. That love got him killed." Meanwhile, psychological experts began to weigh in on the dynamics between Ellie and Gavin. Dr. Rachel Morris, a forensic psychologist who later reviewed the case, said Gavin's behavior showed clear signs of grooming. He isolated her emotionally from her parent, made her question her father's intentions, and reinforced the idea that only he truly understood her, Morris explained. That's classic manipulation, and it's extremely dangerous, especially for a developing teenager. But despite the psychological factors, prosecutors made it clear, love or not, a life had been taken, and there had to be accountability. As the case approached trial, prosecutors released more details from the investigation. Among them were the disturbing text messages between Ellie and Gavin in the days leading up to murder. Gavin said, "He's the reason you're miserable." Ellie replied, "I can't breathe when he's around. I wish it would stop." Gavin replied again, "Then let's make it stop." The messages were the backbone of the prosecution's case. Proof that the murder was premeditated, not spontaneous. Gavin's defense attorney tried to argue that he acted out of passion, that he was a young man who made a terrible mistake out of love. But prosecutors countered that the crime was calculated, brutal, and entirely preventable. As for Ellie, her defense centered on manipulation, that she was groomed, that her brain was not yet fully developed, and that she had been psychologically coerced into go along with something she didn't understand. By summer 2024, plea deals began to emerge. Facing overwhelming evidence, Russell Jones accepted a deal, pleading guilty to second-degree murder and abuse of a corpse in exchange for a reduced sentence. He agreed to testify against Gavin and Ellie. In his statement to court, Russell said, "If I could go back, I'd stop it. I thought I was helping my friend. I didn't realize I was helping destroy a family." His words left the courtroom silent. As for Gavin and Ellie, their trials would take different paths. One as an adult facing life in prison, and one as a minor whose actions blurred the line between victim and perpetrator. Before we move to those explosive courtroom scenes and final verdicts, remember, stories like this remind us that real love never asks for violence. If you're learning something from this story, hit like, share, and subscribe to support responsible true crime storytelling. Next, we'll end at courtroom, where shocking testimonies, emotional breakdowns, and a father's last moments are revealed in heartbreaking detail. When the trial of Gavin MacFarlane and Ellie Friar began, the courthouse in Medford, Oregon, was packed with reporters, family members, and curious locals. Everyone wanted to understand how a teenage love story had turned into one of the state's most disturbing murder cases in recent memory. Aaron Friar's family filled the front row every day. They wore black ribbons on their jackets, silently mourning a father who had only tried to protect his daughter. At the prosecution's table sat a stack of evidence. Photographs of the crime scene, blood analysis reports, and hundreds of text messages between Gavin and Ellie. The prosecution's case was simple but powerful. This was a premeditated murder born from obsession and fueled by manipulation. The courtroom listened as lead prosecutor Rachel Hines described the days leading up to the killing. This was not an accident, she told the jury. This was not a crime of passion. This was a plan hatched by a 19-year-old man who groomed a 15-year-old girl and convinced her that the only way to be free was to end her father's life. She walked to the center of the courtroom, holding a photo of Aaron and Ellie from 2 years earlier, a smiling father and daughter at school science fair. The contrast was heartbreaking. That man loved his child. He raised her alone. He provided, protected, and trusted her. And in return, he was beaten to death while she stood by and did nothing to stop it. Her words hung in the air. Then came the evidence, forensic, digital, and testimonial. Detectives testified about the crime scene, the blood spatter showing multiple impacts, the signs of cleanup, the unlocked door that Ellie had left open for Gavin and Russell. Forensic experts explained how Aaron's DNA was found on the weapon recovered near Ashland, and how fibers from Ellie's blanket matched material found at the burial site. The text messages were perhaps the most damning evidence. The jury read aloud lines like, "Ellie, he's never going to let me live my life. Gavin, then we make our own life. No one will stand in our way." And then, the message prosecutors called the smoking gun. "Gavin, tomorrow night, be ready." The timestamp on that message was December 18th, 2023, the night Aaron was killed. When it was time for the defense, Gavin's attorney painted a very different picture. He argued that Gavin was a confused young man, that the killing wasn't planned, and that Russell's testimony couldn't be trusted. "Russell Jones is the one who confessed," the defense attorney said. "He's the one who led police to the body, and now he's pointing fingers to save himself." He also claimed that Gavin was influenced by his emotions and by Ellie's complaints about her father. He wasn't a monster, the lawyer insisted. He was in love, irrationally, passionately, and tragically in love. But that defense didn't sway the jury much. The brutality of the crime, the deliberate steps to hide the evidence, and the repeated messages planning the event painted a picture of intent, not impulse. Then came Ellie's turn. Because of her age, her case was initially separated, but the judge allowed her to testify in Gavin's trial. When she walked into the courtroom, she looked fragile, far removed from the defiant teenager police once described. As she took the stand, the courtroom went silent. Her soft voice barely carried across the room as she began to recount the events leading to her father's death. She told the court how she met Gavin through social media, how their friendship quickly turned romantic, and how he began to fill the emotional void she felt after her mother's death. "He made me feel understood," she said. "He said he loved me when nobody else did." But over time, that love became control. Gavin started telling her what to wear, who to talk to, even how to think about her father. "He told me Dad was the reason I was unhappy. He said my father wanted to keep me his little girl forever." Her voice broke as she described the night of the murder. "I didn't think he was really going to do it. I thought they were just going to talk, maybe scare him, but then it happened so fast. I couldn't move. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't." When the prosecutor asked her why she didn't run or call for help afterward, Ellie lowered her head. "Because I thought it was my fault. I thought this was what I'd asked for. I just wanted my dad to stop being angry. I didn't want him to die." Some jurors wiped their eyes. Others stared straight ahead, expressionless. It was a moment of painful ambiguity. Was Ellie a victim, a participant, or both? During cross-examination, the prosecution pressed hard. "You opened the door for them, didn't you?" "Yes." "You knew your father didn't want Gavin near the house, correct?" "Yes." "And after your father was killed, you helped clean up the blood, didn't you?" I I did what he told me. The prosecutor paused and asked, Ellie, when you say do you mean Gavin? Yes. That single answer, quiet, broken, seemed to seal Gavin's fate. When closing arguments came, the prosecution reminded the jury that manipulation does not erase intent. Gavin MacFarlane wanted Ellie Friar gone. He wanted Ellie all to himself. He wasn't acting out of passion. He was acting out of calculation. And Ellie, though manipulated, still chose to take part in her father's death. The defense countered that Gavin's actions, while horrific, were driven by immature emotion, not criminal design. They urged the jury to consider his age, only 19, and his lack of criminal history. But the jury deliberated for less than 5 hours. When they returned, the foreperson stood and read the verdict aloud. We, the jury, find the defendant, Gavin MacFarlane, guilty of murder in the first degree. Gasps filled the courtroom. Aaron's family wept silently. Gavin's mother collapsed in her seat. The judge later sentenced Gavin to life in prison, without the possibility of parole. Russell Jones, who had already pled guilty, received 25 years for his role in the murder and concealment of the body. Ellie's sentencing came months later. After long deliberations, the court ruled that despite her age, she had knowingly participated in the crime. However, due to her youth and the evidence of psychological manipulation, she was shown leniency. Ellie Friar was sentenced to 15 years in prison for conspiracy to commit murder and tampering with evidence. She will be eligible for parole after serving 12 years. When the judge announced the sentence, Ellie sobbed uncontrollably. I wish I could take it back, she said through tears. I love my dad. I just didn't understand what was happening to me. The courtroom fell silent once more. There were no winners, only broken lives left behind. After the sentencing, Ellie Friar's sister, Melissa Grant, spoke outside the courthouse. Her voice trembled with pain. Aaron was a good man. He was just trying to protect his little girl. And that's what breaks my heart. He died doing exactly that. She paused and added, I hope Ellie finds peace one day. But I also hope people remember what this story really is, a warning about how easily young people can be manipulated and how dangerous blind love can become. As media outlets across the country reported on the verdict, the story became a national discussion about grooming, teenage vulnerability, and parental control. Schools in Oregon held seminars on online safety and manipulation. Church leaders preached about the dangers of isolation and secrecy. The 48-hour special titled First Love, Then Murder aired soon after the trial. It featured interviews with detectives, friends, and experts, piecing together how a teenage romance escalated into murder. The episode shocked viewers nationwide, reminding everyone that tragedy can lurk even behind innocent faces. Before we head into the final part of the story, the aftermath, the prison years, and how this case changed Oregon forever, take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to this channel. True stories like this deserve to be told, so that lessons can be learned and lives can be saved. Finally, we'll explore what happened after the verdict. Ellie's life in prison, the community's reaction, and the haunting legacy of first love, then murder. The verdict brought a sense of closure for many, but for those who knew the Friar family, closure didn't mean peace. The small Oregon town of Medford, once known for its orchards and quiet charm, would forever be remembered for a crime that defied comprehension, a daughter's betrayal, a father's death, and a love story gone horribly wrong. In the months following the trial, the Friar home remained empty. The family's pastor arranged for Aaron's belongings to be collected and donated, except for a few personal items: his favorite fishing rod, his toolkit, and a framed photo of him and Ellie from her middle school graduation. That picture, once a proud memory, had become a symbol of tragedy. Ellie Friar began her prison sentence at the Oregon Youth Correctional Facility before being transferred to Coffee Creek Correctional Institution once she turned 18. Life inside was harsh and unfamiliar. She spent the first year in therapy programs designed for young offenders. Psychologists described her as intelligent but emotionally underdeveloped, a girl who had been pulled into a fantasy she couldn't escape. One counselor later told the Oregonian, Ellie wasn't evil. She was lost. By the time she realized what Gavin really was, it was too late. Despite being treated as a co-conspirator, Ellie's story became a cautionary tale for other inmates and teens in the system. She began attending group sessions for victims of manipulation and control, learning about psychological grooming, something she now recognized had defined her entire relationship with Gavin. Meanwhile, Gavin MacFarlane began serving his life sentence at the Oregon State Penitentiary in Salem. Prison officials described him as quiet, calculating, and largely emotionless. He rarely spoke to other inmates and refused most interviews. However, a letter he sent to a former classmate leaked online months later. In it, Gavin wrote, "I don't regret loving her. I regret letting that love turn into fear. I thought I was saving her. Maybe I was just saving myself." The letter caused public outrage, not for remorse, but for the absence of it. He spoke of Ellie as if she were still his possession, as if the murder of her father was just a side effect of love. Russell Jones, the third figure in this dark triangle, faded from public attention. After receiving his 25-year sentence, he cooperated with several documentaries and spoke about peer pressure and misplaced loyalty. In a recorded interview years later, he said, "I should have stopped him. I knew what Gavin was planning, but I didn't want to be the coward. I thought it was all talk until it wasn't. That night will never leave me." He remains in prison to this day, eligible for parole in 2048. As for the Friar family, they have tried to rebuild. Aaron's sister Melissa became an advocate for victims of domestic manipulation and teen exploitation. She spoke at schools and community centers across Oregon, warning parents and teens about the dangers of online relationships. "Love isn't supposed to isolate you," she said in a speech at South Medford High School. "If someone tells you to hide things from your family, that's not love, that's control." Her words struck a chord with many young people, especially those who saw pieces of themselves in Ellie. By 2025, the story of first love, then murder, had been adapted into multiple true crime specials and podcasts. The Dateline NBC episode drew millions of viewers, while YouTube creators dissected the case frame by frame, trying to understand how manipulation could lead to such horror. The digital era, ironically, became both the weapon and the witness in this tragedy. Social media had brought Gavin and Ellie together, but it also preserved their messages, their intentions, and the digital trail that ultimately condemned them. In one particularly emotional moment during the 48-hour special, an interviewer asked one of Ellie's former classmates if she thought Ellie deserved forgiveness. The girl paused, then said softly, "I don't know, maybe someday, but not yet, not until she forgives herself first." Years later, Ellie reportedly found faith behind bars. A prison chaplain told reporters she began attending weekly Bible studies and even wrote letters to victims of violent crimes, expressing her desire to help others avoid the mistakes I made. In one of her letters to her Aunt Melissa, she wrote, "Aunt Mel, I think about Dad every day. I dream about that night, and I always wish I could go back. I was stupid. I thought I was in love, but I didn't know what love meant. Love doesn't ask you to kill someone. Love doesn't make you hide. I want to do something good someday, something Dad will be proud of." It was the first letter Melissa had received from her niece since the trial. She never responded publicly, but she later said that she kept the letter folded in her Bible. As time passed, the community moved on, slowly, painfully, but never forgetting. Teachers began incorporating case studies about manipulation and grooming into health education classes. Parents' groups held workshops about online safety. The story of Aaron and Ellie Friar became a somber reminder that evil doesn't always come in the form of strangers. Sometimes it's disguised as affection. In 2024, a documentary titled First Love, Then Murder, the Oregon case premiered on Netflix. It featured exclusive police interviews, unseen text messages, and voice recordings that painted an even clearer picture of Gavin's manipulation. The final scene of the documentary showed the last text Ellie ever sent her father the night before he died. "I love you, Dad. I'll see you tomorrow." The irony was devastating. A goodbye disguised as love. Even now, years later, the case remains one of the most disturbing examples of teenage manipulation and misplaced love in Oregon's history. Experts continue to use it in seminars about digital safety, pointing to how quickly trust emotion, and rebellion can spiral out of control. It's not just a story of murder. It's a story of warning, a story that reminds us that the heart, when unguarded, can become the most dangerous weapon of all. If you follow this story to the end, remember, love should never cost someone their life. If you ever find yourself in a situation where love turns to control, secrecy, or fear, speak up. Tell someone, because silence can be deadly. Thank you for watching this true story of first love, then murder. If you found it important, like, share, and subscribe, not for the views, but to spread awareness about how manipulation destroys lives. This has been a tragic story of Ellie Friar and Gavin MacFarlane, a forbidden love that turned to murder, and a haunting reminder that sometimes first love can truly be the last.